Yesterday we were starting to talk about, okay, if we wanted to design a locker list for the school, what would be the details that would go into a locker, and kind of what's the basics of what an interface might look like? And you guys were taking that and applying it to, okay, if I was going to make a contact list, what would be the base information I want to store in a contact list, and what would I start to make my interface look like? Today I want to think about, how do I create the array and start to use the array a little bit within the program? So within the program somewhere, I'm going to need to make an array of lockers to store the list of all the details. And so I'll have a line that looks something like this one: private locker array. By putting the square brackets, I'm identifying it as being an array, so it stores more than one locker. And I'm calling my array lockers. I use a plural word because that just reminds me as I'm reading code, oh yeah, this is an array. There's more than one here. And if I did new locker equals 1100, that would mean there's enough space in my program to store the details about 1,100 lockers. Something to keep in mind is that what happens if you at some point in time need to change that for the program? What happens if, for example, we got more lockers installed in the school and now all of a sudden we have more than 1,100 lockers? Or we wanted to make this program available to multiple schools, and some schools have 800 lockers and some schools have 2,000 lockers. Just depends on the size of the school, right? With an array that size, whatever number I write there sort of predetermines how many you can store in that array. You can't change it once you make the array. There are different ways to program. You can do cool things where, like, as the program is running, you calculate how many lockers you need, and then you write that line with a variable instead of the hard-coded 1,100. And it is a little more flexible. But once you execute this line, once you execute a line that says private array, whatever it is, equals new whatever kind, and give it a value, that's how many elements are in the array, and it can't be changed by the program. So if we required a program that would do different numbers of lockers, we either have to think of a number that's big enough that you would never need more than that, or we just have to use a different data structure altogether. And you guys will learn more about different types of data structures in future computer science classes. For us, it's enough to say, okay, pick a number that's big enough that you would never go over that value, because you can't change it once you make it. Fair enough? So now I want to start thinking a little bit code-wise. Okay, how am I going to create that array of lockers in my code? How am I going to initialize the array of locker details in my program? And how are those two things different from each other? I create my array with a line that looks like the one on the previous slide. Private locker array, lockers equals new locker array with 1,100 in it. All that does is set aside space in memory to have 1,100 lockers available. If I pull up my code here, just organize my screen before I put it on screen. All right, here's the code for my locker interface. If I wanted to make the space to store the details about 1,100 lockers, I would do something along the lines of private locker array, lockers equal to new locker array with 1,100. And that should be big enough for our purposes. That sets aside space in memory to make 1,100 locker objects. Remember, a locker object, don't need that one. Locker object is just a simple object that stores a locker number, student name, student number, combination, grade, serial number, and the floor the locker's on. If I do that, I have the space to store them, but I don't have any actually in the array yet. Somewhere within my program, I'm going to have lines that say locker 0 equals new locker with all the details for that new locker. Locker 1 equals with details for the next locker. Right? Where do I want to put that? There's a couple of places that I could put it, and there's one that I think is the best. I could put it into the start method for the program, because in a JavaFX program, start is one of the first methods that gets executed, but its real job is setting up what the window looks like, setting up the interface for the program. It's not really have a job of loading data, right? And somewhere within this start method, I'm going to want to put the first person's locker details into the interface so that I don't start with like a blank screen. So I don't want to have the details loaded before I try to put the first person's details on the interface, right? A better place to put this, it would be in the constructor method for the locker interface object. Remember that a constructor is the method that gets called when you first try to create an object of a particular class. So in JavaFX, what's going to happen is when my program says launch, right? That's the main method. That's the first thing that happens. It goes launch. What does launching a JavaFX application do? Well, the first thing it does is it creates an object of this kind, the locker interface kind. That means that the constructor method for the locker interface, if it exists, gets called and makes that object. The next thing that happens is the start method gets called, and it creates the interface and all the little parts that make up the interface, right? And then it starts listening for events to happen, like pressing a button. And when a button happens, it calls the code that responds to the button. And essentially sits there waiting for events to happen until you close the program. Then there's a couple of methods that are called when the program gets closed as well. So that like if you wanted to save the whole list of locker details to disk before you shut the program down, you can. Okay, so I'm going to make use of that constructor method. I'm going to put it just above start. Constructor method gets the same name as the locker or as the class. So it'd be locker interface. And if I want to have arguments, I can have them, but I want to make a base constructor with no arguments or no parameters in the method. And this is the place where I would load the details for all the assigned lockers. Right now, I'm going to do it in kind of a basic way and just go, okay, here's the details that I want to give for each particular locker. So like lockers 0 is equal to new locker. And then I have to provide information to create a new locker. And if I put my JavaDoc information for the constructor, I would know what order I'm supposed to put that in. So the locker number, name of the student, student number, combination, grade, serial number, and what floor it's on. That's the order of the details that I have to give. All right, so locker number, oh, what's your locker number? I don't know, it's the one over to the left. 2475, I don't know, locker numbers or something like that. Second detail. 1322, now I remember. 1322. Owner, O. There's no H. Just O. Still doesn't tell me about the details. Student number, combination, grade. Student number, we're just going to say you're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
That's actually great. I'm joking.
Combination, grade, serial number. So combination 13, 10, 30. That's actually my combination from when I was in high school. Still remember it. Grade 12. We got combination, we got grade. We need serial number of the lock. D5047. They usually look something like that. And floor, that'd be a first floor locker?
Yeah.
1. Right, and I want to have 3 or 4 lockers in my program, so I'm just going to program in a few. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll give them different locker numbers: 13, 23, 24, 23, 17, and 3105. That's going to be Jesse, and that's going to be
Noah.
William, and that's going to be Noah, and that's going to be Ryan. For the rest of it, I'm just going to leave the combinations and everything the same. Go through and change that if I wanted to. But that's going to load up my lockers into the individual array spots with all of their details. Now, I'm only going to do about 4 or 5 of them right now. Later in developing this program, I'm hoping that we get a way to save the details to disk and then load them back so that if we had an array of 1,000, we don't have to individually write the details for 1,000 students, because what's the point of having the app to do that if we're going to write them all down by hand anyway? So I have a few here to make sure that my interface can work. All right. Just wanted to really quickly put a system.out.println. This is the constructor loading locker details. The reason I'm putting that in there is so that we can see like when it happens, because that doesn't happen on screen. And then neither does the creation of the actual interface. System.out.println start method, creating the interface. So if I run that, I'm not going to show details yet. I got to work on how to do that still. But in my console, I'm going to see what happened first. The constructor loaded all my locker details, and then the start method happened, which created my interface. And it's important that it happened in that order, because I have all my details loaded up, and if I want to show them on the screen now, they're available to show. If I didn't have all my details loaded and I tried to show them, that would probably cause a crash in my program, right? And then it was on my other screen, but the interface came up. No details displayed because I didn't do any code to do that. Before I do write a little bit of that code today, wanted to think a little bit logistically about how that array is holding the details. So you can imagine, like, there's the list of lockers, right? And if I have the first 5 assigned to Bart, Lisa, Milhouse, Nelson, and Ralph, and then I have, what, 1,095 more lockers that are not assigned yet. They're just blank. There's no details. The objects would be null, right? It's not a locker that has no information. It's null, a non-existent locker in my array. So I got 5 people that actually have lockers, and then the rest of it not filled. There's a lot of good reasons why I don't want to have blank spaces throughout the middle of the lockers. Like, I don't want to have Bart, null, null, Lisa, null, Nelson, null, Milhouse, null, 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 Ralph. that's not going to work well for me, because imagine if you're scrolling through the list of lockers and you got through a range of ones that are not assigned, blank, 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 blank. It's not going to, I don't know, be a very desirable program. And some of the algorithms that I want to do for sorting through this list are going to work better if there's no space left in it. So I don't want to have spaces left in the array. I want to have it all nicely compressed. The first 5 elements are the people that have lockers, and then everything after that is just blank space waiting for a new locker to be assigned. Make sense? So now I want to be able to track in that list. Well, the first thing I want to be able to do is see, okay, the first locker is Bart. When I click on the next button, I want it to switch the details over to Lisa. Click on the next button, I want it to switch the details over to Millhouse. How can I make that part work? Right? Roll my sleeves up and get into it. The first thing I want to do is like actually be able to see the details of the locker so I can tell whether or not it's working. So let's get that to work in the app. Code, where are you? There you are. And I want to create a method here that just goes show locker, as in show the details for locker number, whatever. If I want to start at locker 0, I'll show the details for locker 0. All right, so show the details for some locker number. In my list of stuff that I can display, I've got, let me just copy these so I don't have to retype them. I've got the locker number, the student name, the student number, the grade, the combo, and the serial number. So to show that locker, all I would need to do is, it would have been easier to just retype these. Change the locker number text field, change the student text field, change the student number, grade, combination, serial number text fields. To change the text field, of course, I'm going to do locker number dot set text. And I'd like to set it to the details for the locker that I'm trying to show the details for. So lockers, array number, well, which one do I want to see? I passed an integer to the method as an argument for the method for which one I want to see. So I want to see locker number. And for the locker number, what do I want? Get, should be locker number in there or get number in there. Get locker number. So that's the locker number. The student would be set text. Locker number dot, before I change anything, I'm just going to copy that. In this case, it's the student's name, so dot get name, or get student name. Got it. For the student number, set the text of that to locker number dot get student number. For the grade, I'll do locker number dot get, I think it's just dot get grade. Yep, there it is, get grade. The grade is an integer, so I might need to convert that to string, like that. Combination. Is that actually the name of the method? I don't think it is. Get, yes it was, not get combo. We got one more to go. Serial number. Get serial number. Okay, so in the start method, when I say, oh, this one is an integer as well, just need to convert it to string. In the start method, when I say show locker number 0, that's going to look in the array, find out the details for 0. That'd be O's locker. And so now when I run the program, I loaded the details for the lockers. Locker 0 is O. And then as I'm setting up the interface elements, I said show the details for locker 0. And I should be able to look up and show O's locker number, his name, his student number, or what we put for a student number, grade, combination, and serial number. Yeah. I like that it comes up over here first. I can see if it worked, but it did. Had confidence, somewhat. So now all of those details are filled in for the first one. Last thing I want to accomplish today is, can I make it scroll through and have these buttons work? Or how can I make these buttons work? Right? Because I've got 5 records for my lockers loaded up in that array. The first one displays because I said show locker number 0. Once I press this button, the first time, I want it to move forward 1 in the array. So I want to show locker number 1. And then when I hit the button again, I want to show locker number 2. And then when I hit the button again, I want to show locker number 3. To me, that says I need some kind of variable that's tracking which locker I'm actually showing right now. And then when I hit the button, I add 1 onto that number and show the new locker. Right? So I need a variable to track that. Let's make a private integer about current locker. And we'll set it to 0 because at the beginning of the program, we're showing locker number 0, the first one in the list. But then, all right, my buttons, I've got them set up already. Start with button forward. When button forward gets clicked, it goes to the method show next locker. Okay, good. If you want to move around your screen a little bit quicker, you can go show view outline. And pull my outline up for me. And I want to go to the show next locker method. All your methods are there in alphabetical order. And if you click one, it just moves you back and forth through the code to whichever one you picked. All right, show my next locker. Well, to get to the next locker, I have to bump up the one that I'm currently displaying by 1 and then show that locker. So the current locker goes up by 1. And I have a method already to show that locker. Show locker and which number I want. So show locker, locker, the current one. That's really all I'm going to have to do. Current locker is now 1 or 1 higher than it used to be. So it goes in and looks up locker number 1. Hit that again. Current locker would change to 2. Call the method with 2. It looks up locker erase position 2. Gonna cause me one bit of grief when I do that. Right now I'm on number 0, it shows O, and then it goes to Jesse, and then it goes to William, and then it goes to Noah. Can't remember who the last person, Ryan was the last person on the list. What happens if I press the button again? I'm going to hit into the null part of the array. Oh, that's not a good thing because when I try to look up the locker number for a null object, I'm going to get a crash because there is no locker number. I guess it would be 5. That's a null object. How can I avoid this happening? Make sure that I don't advance past how many lockers there is. How many lockers is there? I don't have anything that tells me how many lockers there is. I need a variable to track that as well. So I make a variable. I need a variable to track this. There's space for 1,100 lockers, but there isn't 1,100 in the list. Right? There's space for 1,100, but there's not 1,100. So I need a variable as private int. Let's call it total lockers. Or how about total lockers? Total used lockers. I don't know. Something like that. And I'm going to put it to 0 there because I don't know how many are used completely. But after I load them all up, I do. Total used lockers is going to be equal to 5. So I never want to go equal to 5. If I go equal to that number, I'm going to be 1 too far. That's too much, right? So, and then my that line in my show next locker method, I put the current locker up, but only if I'm not going to be past the number of used lockers. How am I going to check that? I'm going to say if the current locker is at least less than the total number of used lockers, -1. Why do I have the -1 on there? Because I can't go past, right? Before I add 1 onto the current locker, I got to make sure there's enough room to add 1 more on. That'll check, and then it won't let me move past the ones that are actually there. All right, just going to give that a quick little test. All right, if I advance through the list of lockers, I get up to Ryan, and now I don't have any more space to move past Ryan. And so even though I'm clicking the button, no, there's no more lockers to look at. All right, last thing to do, 5 minutes or less. How can I go down a locker? Instead of adding 1 on, subtract 1. Basically the same code, except subtract 1. But now I don't need current locker to be less than that. I need it to be greater than 0. And as long as it's bigger than 0, I can take 1 off and still be within the list of the array. Show the current locker. And the buttons to jump right to the first locker. This one's needs less protection because I'm just jumping to locker number 0. And jumping to the last locker on the list, I'm going to jump right up to total used lockers -1. Right? I'm putting the -1 because arrays start their count at 0. So there's 5 used lockers. The actual array index numbers are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. The total used lockers is 5. So I got to go, what's the total that's been used? -1 to get the last one on the list that's actually filled. So I do that. I think I've got all 4 buttons working to go back and forth between the lockers. So I start with O, I can move forward, I can move backwards, I can jump all the way to Ryan, I can jump all the way back to O's locker. And